Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my February 2022 page 112 tag. The page 112 tag was started by Sean the Book Maniac. He based it off of a French literary prize wherein they comprised the long list by reading solely page 112 of the books in contention. So that in a novel is usually halfway or a third of the way into the book. So you read it without any of the context of the story that comes before, and you can only judge that page based on the writing of the page. I mean, technically speaking anyway. I've been doing this iteration of the page 112 tag since COVID, and I'll link down to my playlist below. I have this handy dandy Books and Cats mug with titles in it that I've acquired on my physical bookshelf since 2021 and before. And what I do is I pick out 3 of these titles at random, and then I read page 112 with you all, and then decide which of the books, after talking about them, I will be adding to my month's TBR. And hopefully I will be playing by the rules of the game in part at least, or what I'm saying is that I don't always take the writing into account as number one. Sometimes, like this month, I'm concerned about other reading deadlines, and the smaller books tend to stick out to me more as possibilities. But anyway, first we will go ahead and pick out these 3, and at least I will be talking about them with you here. So starting with number 1. Okay. Yeah. Oop, no, these stick together too, of course, so it's hard to separate these things. Ah, I already saw it a little bit, but this is The Girls by Emma Cline. So this is a book that I have had in my possession for a while, and in fact, I think I read it in my very first page 112 tag that I did during COVID. So I'm excited that I get to give it another go now. Okay, and then going for number 2, hoping for some sort of variety to make things fun, but we'll just see what comes out here. Ah, In the Land of Israel by Amos Oz. This is relatively different. This is nonfiction that I also pulled before, and already I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to be up to this one. Kind of have to be in the right headspace, I think, for tackling this conflict, although maybe that's a cop-out, because actually I'm in an Israel club with my synagogue right now, and we are tackling books like this every month, so, you know. And finally, book number 3. Last month I didn't get any books that I had previously done on this on these videos, and now I might be 3 for 3, or I might have one other book. We shall see once I stop yammering. It's hard to even know where I was before, but let's guess this one. Nope, this is 3 for 3 books I've picked for these tags before. This is The Veins of the Ocean by Patricia Engel. I think I just had this out a few months ago. And we're back to fiction and family drama fiction, and yeah, that's definitely in my wheelhouse. Okay, now you've seen me pick out these 3 books, and now I'm going to insert clips from the past where I read these 3 segments, because less post-production, huzzah! But I'll have to consider them anew, as they are now competing against each other for the first time. So anyway, here we go. Okay, I'm back, starting with book number 1, The Girls by Emma Cline. And I'm going to read a little bit more than, I guess, page 112. I did for the last book, too, because there was a run-on sentence, but with this one in particular, it's a large textbook, so I figure it is even more incentive that I should go on a little bit into 113, into the end of a section. Mostly girls crash here, she said. It depends. And Nico sometimes, even though I don't want him to. I want him to grow up free, but he likes me. A square of stained silk was tacked above a mattress, a Mickey Mouse pillowcase on the bed. Suzanne passed me a rolled cigarette, the end wet with her saliva. Ash fell on her bare thigh, but she didn't seem to notice. It was weed, but it was stronger than what Connie and I smoked, the dry refuse from Peter's sock drawer. This was oily and dank, and the cloying smoke it produced didn't dissipate quickly. I waited to start feeling differently. Connie would hate all this, think this place was dirty and strange, that Guy was frightening. This knowledge made me proud. My thoughts were softening, the weeds starting to surface. Are you really 16? Suzanne asked. I wanted to keep up the lie, but her gaze was too bright. I'm 14, I said. Suzanne didn't seem surprised. I'll give you a ride home if you want. You don't have to stay. I licked my lips. Did she think I couldn't handle this? Or maybe she thought I would embarrass her. I don't have to be anywhere, I said. Suzanne opened her mouth to say something, then hesitated. Really, I said, started to feel desperate. It's fine. There was a moment when Suzanne looked at me, when I was sure she'd send me home, pack me back to my mother's house like a truant. But then the look drained into something else, and she got to her feet. You can borrow a dress, she said. Okay, so once again, I come in with the bias of knowing that this story is, it's sort of a riff on the Manson family and what drew young girls to that cult leader. So I am coming in with a bias again. I can't seem to escape it about thinking, well, Suzanne and the narrator are maybe in his compound or whatever it would be, and the smoking weed even kind of plays into that, taking drugs that might alter your perception of reality. And it's not really fair of me to think of all that, I suppose. On the page, I see a desperate 14-year-old girl who kind of wants to have an experience that's beyond her, like she thinks about a friend in her who had less potent weed, and how, hey, this is a step up, that I can have this more potent weed, and she tries and fails to keep up the lie that she's older than she is, and she's obviously trying to make an impression on this woman, Suzanne, who I guess I would assume she looks up to in some sort of way based on her behavior. It's interesting. I mean, the writing to me is like what I'm naturally attracted to when it comes to a lot of the literary fiction I read. It's very personal. There's lots of physical details and also some emotional details about the setting and the situation. It didn't grab me as much as the Attenberg, but it's something. Next is In the Land of Israel by Amos Oz. We were hoping to avoid a confrontation and to allow the Rabin Perez government to save face. We figured that, as far as this particular area was concerned, we might succeed in stretching the Labor Party territorial doctrine, what they call consolidating Greater Jerusalem, by a slightly broader interpretation. And we also managed to exploit the split between Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres. The political echelon informed us, the answer to your request to remain in this area is negative. But the regional army commander has received an order to ignore you altogether, not to remove you, and not to aid you in any way. I suppose they thought we'd cave in on our own and save them an evacuation by force. When our people heard this announcement late one night at the military administration building in Ramallah, we immediately broke out the cognac and drank a toast with the military commanders. That same night, they drove us back to Ofra by military vehicle because they didn't want anything to happen to us along the way. At that very moment, the order from the top not to aid us was breached. Later on, to prevent any Arab assault on Ofra, they passed on some spare weapons to certain settlements, and they passed them on to us. The highest level turned a blind eye. The position of the Rabin government was, at the least, ambivalent toward us. Why, once when we went to a meeting with Rabin, the director of his office told us that we were Perez's baby, and that therefore we shouldn't expect any help from Rabin. But Rabin didn't get in our way much either. The military in the area helped us a lot. Shimon Peres helped a lot. At least once a month he'd come personally to visit us and see how we were doing. Okay, this one's a tough one in a few ways. It's a very controversial subject. Also, this entire page 112 was part of one single paragraph that started, I assume, maybe hopefully on page 111, not earlier, and ended on page 113. So it's not exactly the cleanest, easiest writing to follow, and we're obviously in the middle of a situation that a lot of context would be helpful. I mean, I realize this tag is about assessing the value of the writing on the page, but certainly in terms of discussing a controversial nonfiction issue, such as what is certainly the settlements, is what Amos Oz is talking about, it would be nice to have more context. And I am surprised, though. I mean, certainly what it seems like from this page, he seemed more than okay with being in the settlements, like, celebrating that the Israeli government more or less wasn't enforcing the rules to evacuate them. There's also a little bit in here about fractions between the Labor Party government, between the two major rulers, Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin. And this is certainly, it's a different time for Yitzhak Rabin too, at least given this page where he was mostly okay with what was happening, because later on he was, famous for trying to broker a peace deal. So yeah, I definitely still want to read this book. I'm wary about assessing its quality based on just on this one page, basically. I really don't think this fits the tag well because of, the subject matter being as, fraught as it is, and also the writing, just that it's this rambly, dense paragraph that goes on and on. So I don't think I'll be reading this now because it's a topic I think I'd want to choose with more care to read about, because it is such a fraught one. So I don't think that's in the cards for me anyway, and I don't think it fulfills page 112 anyway either, as being, a good, the strongest anyway, page 112. So I feel more okay in letting this one go. For now. And finally, The Veins of the Ocean by Patricia Engel. A baby will brighten things, Raina. Maybe it's your destiny. Fuck destiny, I said, and he warned me not to tempt bad fortune by talking that way. Till he got locked up, Carlito was a church-going guy. First with Mommy, even when I refused to go with them. Then with Isabella and her daughter. They'd sit side by side in the front of the church, the perfect little family. Don't you ever want to be a mom? Carlito asked me that day. Not by some huevon who won't even talk to me now. When it was over, he drove me home and helped me into bed. I slept for 2 days. ¿Y a esa que le pasa? Mama asked. Carlito lied, telling her I'd eaten some rotten bistec, and just to mix me some caldo to settle my stomach. With Nesto in front of me, talking about his family, I consider for a moment all the times I might have created a family of my own, where I would be now if I let that happen. The only certain thing is that I wouldn't be here now, on this island, with him. Why did you leave them to come here? I ask. Your children, I mean. I didn't leave them. I just took the first step, so I can throw out the rope and they can come behind me. So I like parts of this. This is something that invites conjecture. It really seems to me like there's an abortion happening between the lines. We're talking about wanting to be a mother and not being a mother, and the protagonist or the first person is sick, and we're lying about why. So that's certainly what I'm thinking about, is that, this is about getting an abortion, but I might be, going too far with that, I don't know. But, it's a little confusing. There's some, pronouns and things that don't always match up, and so, maybe I'd understand more if I knew the rest of the story, but sometimes it got a little confusing. But for the most part, it seems to be a conversation between the protagonist and this man, Carlito, who it seems like she might be in a relationship with, illicit, perhaps, because he's left his children to be with her. Although I really like that last line about going forth and first and then throwing back a rope. It's a way to still want to be involved in your kids' lives, I guess. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. So it's kind of weird to choose something based on 3 different conversations that weren't completely in conversation with each other at the time. Though then again, I actually do tags like this every 4 months, including I'll do one next month where I pitch the runners-up of December and January and this month against each other for my March read. But anyway, before I get to that, let me tell you what I think about February. I do think In the Land of Israel is a little too heavy for me right now. In fact, as I am filming this, I'm currently in the middle of another heavy conflict read for my book club, which is meeting on Tuesday, so I gotta snap to that. So that leaves me choosing between The Girls and The Veins of the Ocean. And okay, I mean, they both definitely sound pretty interesting to me. I think both page 112s had their strengths and their weaknesses. So I am going to go ahead and choose The Girls for a couple reasons, I guess. Number one, this was one of my early picks for the page 112 tag that I then put aside, and I feel like I'm biased that it's been sitting on my shelves and I've considered it, and I feel like sooner or later I do want to come back to it and actually read it, so why not now? And number two, I'm kind of wanting to challenge myself a little bit too, because this subject is a little less in my wheelhouse than the family drama, which I think is going to be more a part of this one. I do think there's going to be family drama in this one as well, but the focus definitely does seem to be on cult behavior and the appeal of cultists on young girls. So let's give that a go. So that about covers it for me now. One of the final things I do in these videos is I call out readathons or TBR games because I feel like what I'm doing here is kind of in the vein of that. Sometime recently in the past, I came across Matthew Sharapa's video on the Shiftathon, which he is hosting with a co-host from February 16th to 22nd. And it seems to be about escapist fantasy, urban fantasy sort of stuff, like reading books about, you know, shifters as in, you know, werewolves or less popular ones, or, you know, vampires or elves of the non-high fantasy variety, I suppose. I tend to view fantasy through a very snooty lens. I go for the epic fantasy, secondary world, nuanced Maximist discussions of politics and religion and socioeconomics, you know, that sort of stuff. I don't tend to necessarily go for the escapist fiction as much, but I think it does sound appealing in a way of if you want to take it easy for a little bit, which actually certainly sounds appealing to me right now as I'm in the middle of a lot of deadlines. You'd want the rest of the reading to be kind of fun, I suppose. Hopefully cults are fun. But anyway, and you can find that video linked down below. So I've stuffed myself full of reading and angst about deadlines this month, so in my next video in the next couple of days, I think I'm going to take a look back to the past. I have co-opted another tag, the Would You Read It challenge, where you're supposed to pick random books and read the first sentence and ask your audience if you're going to read them. And instead I've gone by paragraphs, and I'm going back into my past and taking a gander at some of my 2019 reading and seeing what I think of it now. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.